COVID-19 crept up on the world in early 2020. During 2020 and 2021, there were many lockdowns. Melbourne had 6, totalling 267 days. This meant, of course, that teaching and learning had to go online. The idea of this video is to have a record of how COVID affected the Mount Lilydale Mercy College community.
And this, when he behaves, is Charlie, who is our school wellbeing dog. And the introduction of Charlie really came out of discussions about post-COVID and helping our students cope.
How did you feel when you heard that we were being locked down?
I had a real sense of disbelief. I just did not think that we could possibly run schools remotely. Just wondered how were we going to cope. And thankfully we had a bit of time just to organise ourselves so that we could find a path forward. So first, mine was disbelief.
I went into a state of panic because it was like, it happened within 12 hours. Like we were finishing school on the Monday and we were meant to be remoting on the Tuesday morning. And it was like, oh my gosh. It was just a state of, what do we do? Are we organised? And I think everyone just crossed their fingers and toes and hoped it would work, at least for the first few days.
Nice holiday break.
Long holiday. I don't think we all thought that it was going to last as long as it did.
Yeah.
No, I didn't think it was going to last 2 years. I thought maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I was in shock because I thought to myself, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do counselling, as well as thinking how are the teachers going to teach? But in particular with counselling, I thought some of the issues that the students come to us about are family-related issues.
Right.
So I just thought, will they be able to express their worries and concerns in the family unit when everyone's there? And
my response was panic for all the right reasons. I was new to a school and new to a role.
Of course.
And then very quickly realised that the next response is operational.
I must admit I didn't panic because I'm a very strategic person. I very, very quickly went into what does that mean for us? What do we have to do? What processes do we need to put in place? And how do we go about the distribution of work to make sure that we keep operating? So the priority through every piece of really the last 3 years, because in many ways this year has been more of a challenge than the previous 2, has always been how do we keep our students engaged in their learning and how do we keep our community connected, whether that's parents, students or teachers, and keeping all 3 connected in different ways was a huge challenge.
We'd already started some processes with online. I think we might have had a week away from school or it was building up during the holidays, so there's already talk, so there was already a little bit of preparation in place. And so when we started talking about what we're going to do, it was, I think most of us thought, well, we're going to be delivering lessons on a camera.
I remember the first one, it was towards the end of the term and it was sort of the unknown. It was a little bit exciting, but not knowing exactly how it was going to go either.
I was pretty actually nervous for some of my team members because I'm aware that a lot of them have young children. My children were young, but they could read.
I suppose we were very naive too. We didn't realise the extent of the extended lockdowns, and we thought this will be just for a short time. Sure, we can do this. We can, wing it if we need to. But little did we know.
So what about you people as Year 7s? You'd had camp, so what, were you a couple of weeks here at school before the lockdown?
Almost the first term.
Scary because you knew no one going into it.
How did you go making friends? Because didn't know as many students as you thought?
Yeah, I used social media to get to know a lot of my classmates. Okay. But this year I don't know as many people because I didn't see their faces in school.
Yeah, the same, like using social media to get to know people.
Now, you weren't at the school at the time. When you were working, what did you feel when lockdown occurred?
Sheer panic because at the time I was managing multiple residential education programs, so everything that we had to do needed to change. The whole program that we delivered was going to radically radically change or be truncated, really.
Emma, you did a lot of work in private practice during COVID.
Yeah, and I was similar to both Tina and Kane, so shock and disbelief of what was happening. How do I do my own family with 3 children while trying to set up all these other structures to continue to work from home? And for my clients who were child and adolescent in private practice, it was really, worrying about how they were going to fare when some of them didn't, some of their stresses were about being at home and then they were going to be at home, and how they would manage with school and their learning, and just overwhelmed, I think, of trying to figure out all these things in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, a bit of excitement.
Yeah.
And a bit of
something quite different, wasn't it?
Or something different,
yeah. A mad dash to try and make sure everybody had what they needed to, and waiting to see what that would be like.
So Phil, you obviously were flat chat the whole time, but to keep the parents engaged and also the staff, I know the staff particularly, you were very concerned that they were looked after.
The hardest part was you'd wait for a government announcement and you never know when it was going to come. So essentially the government would announce things publicly first, and then you would scramble to try and put the infrastructure in place. And so I would spend most Sunday nights writing what we call staff briefing notes, and at some stages they got to be 12 and 13 pages long, depending on what was happening. We'd then do Zoom meetings with staff on a Monday morning to talk about the way forward. I would make probably at least one video to staff every week. I probably made a couple for parents, but I'd be writing to parents 2 or 3 times a week just to try to keep them informed of the changing situation and trying to keep on top of it. But the biggest challenge was really dealing with, we knew something was coming, but we didn't know when it was coming or how long it was going to be. And of course, we had to keep school open because at stages we had up to 100 students on campus of essential workers or students who weren't coping at home. So we had to have them supervised. And because you had to have them on campus, you had to have a number of staff on campus. We also had to deal with staff who were living by themselves, which is quite problematic because the staff are obviously just as social as kids, and we recognised that they were isolated, so we set up phone trees and contract trees to make sure that all of our staff had someone that they spoke to at least once a week. We had to arrange things like staff who weren't coping at home and wanted things like stand-up desks, so we were running stand-up desks out to homes and things like that. We had to do the same things that we would do for parents, students and staff on campus, but find ways to do it all remotely. And really, the executive was on call 24/7.
So you must have all been exhausted. You were thrown in the deep end, really. So how did you go about planning on how you were going to teach? Was it a collaborative team effort?
It was certainly collaborative for that exact reason that we were thrown into the deep end. There would have been leaders that were the ones who were sort of the ideas, bringing the ideas forward, but everyone was in the same situation, and I don't think there was many people who sort of took a backward step.
So you would have met fairly regularly to work out things, is that?
Well, under Phil's leadership, we formed a crisis team and a roadmap, and to do that we worked excessive hours, I'd like to say, because we worked weekends, we worked early mornings until we were comfortable with the daily program, and with whatever foresight we could offer, we had an intense period of intense time together.
So when you had classes, so you all had to go onto Zoom, and so you could see faces in the corners, or could people turn themselves off?
Most people had them.
Is that like log in, get the roll marked and log out?
Go make a coffee.
Yeah, I think not a lot of people thought, just because of how long it was going to go, we got that initial 2 weeks sort of notice, and then it kind of dragged on. So Zoom, I think, was, a little bit, not taken that seriously to start with.
Yeah, looking at the overseas models where people have started to lock down, we kind of figured, it's best to
So
prepare.
you went straight into planning mode, did you?
Yeah.
That's true. Being the manager, he's already looking further ahead than the rest of us. So looking down the line, looking what's happening overseas and maybe going, well, this is what's in store. What do we need to do?
Yeah, we put in our plexiglass early. We put in our
Plexiglass.
plexiglass.
Oh, the glass.
We put a shield,
protection.
like an anti-spitting field.
And the air purifier.
We
Air
had our
purifier.
before anyone else had, and they were like, oh, okay.
So what did you actually do? I believe you set up some sort of program for the students, was there?
So initially what we did, we had to learn technology very quickly, and we secured a telehealth service that was encrypted and safe for us to do counselling online. And we made sure that on a weekly basis or fortnightly basis that we connected with the year level leaders to work out from them who was absent in the classes.
And what sort of patterns?
Yeah, what were the patterns and what did they observe from their point of view. And then, we would constantly be online with them or on the phone to them and working out what do we know, how much do we know about this student, what's going on, what's their background. And
would have been very difficult with parents being in the house at the same time too. In your situation, in your area, what did you actually have to do specifically once we were locked down?
Well, prior to lockdown, we actually started to order devices for staff and to prepare. We actually look into the repair process and the turnaround, how we could help them out, because the device had to come to us and then it has to go to the repairers, or we repair it and then it has to go back to the students.
So you can only move 5 kilometres from home and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, that was a whole other thing, wasn't it? Having to make sure they had letters of permission to come to the school and all those sorts of things. When a device needed repairing, because the students are so often able to come up to us and go, hey, I've got a broken screen, can you fix it? Yeah, we had to find out a way to kind of do that.
Yeah, a lot of the teachers, well, not a lot, but some of them didn't, weren't used to that either, the kind of technology.
We're kind of different generations.
Not necessarily the older ones though, like some of them were a lot more used to it than some of the younger ones. So it was just like how they, I guess, use it in everyday life.
A lot of staff that just have those IT skills, and they sort of came to the fore, and we were sharing videos of this way of screen sharing and this, like all the different digital platforms available to us. So there was instantly a greater collaboration that just sparked into being out of necessity.
We were fortunate that we had Classroom already, because we're a Google school, so that was already in place. So the background was already there. It was just a matter of transferring that to the students via a different medium where they weren't actually in the classroom. But I think for a lot it was seamless, but I suppose for some oldies it may have been a little bit more challenging.
So was there a group that wanted more support? Was it mainly the 7 parents, whereas the rest of the school?
It was across the board, really, considering that the students were coming into school using their devices, and then all of a sudden they have to go back home and start connecting to their Wi-Fi, their network and everything. So we were kind of getting calls from parents how their network's going to cope with the sudden influx of working from home, and then suddenly kids are also connecting.
And a number of our students live quite remotely. How did they cope with that, and how did you?
They were very concerned, because the further out you go, the less reliable the internet is.
So as a school, we decided to, for those students who did struggle with Wi-Fi, that they would be allowed on campus. So that was like a great way to back up having, some not so great, Wi-Fi or internet. And when everybody in the whole family is using, the internet all at once, there's a lot of people getting kicked out and why isn't this working? So there was a lot of phone calls about that.
Okay.
With the students that I work with, it was like they just looked at you like they had no idea. It was like, coming into a light and they're going, oh my gosh, Mrs. S. I said, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. We're going to get this going. We've got the Zoom meetings happening. It was the unknown. It really was. It was the unknown. And for some of these kids who struggled any time to get to school and didn't want to be in a classroom. And now they're going to be stuck inside in a bedroom. It was huge.
I think it was surprising how, well, maybe not surprising, but impressive that everyone was so resilient to just like get onto their computers, onto Wi-Fi and do online learning, like to use the tools that they did have, even if they weren't used to doing it that way. I found that, that was it wasn't perfect, but it worked pretty well. So I think that was, it was great. There's pressure you put on yourself, and also I guess as us and staff and also parents and students, like how important it was to just make sure their education was at the level that it had always been. But then maybe chatting to parents on the phone and kind of counselling them and going, it's okay that you can't get online today.
Panicked, didn't they?
There was
They
a lot of
think, well, the
counselling.
kids are going to get into trouble.
We're counsellors.
Oh, you're counsellors now. Well done.
There's a lot of counselling.
I had meltdowns and people couldn't get on the Wi-Fi or things weren't working, and there was a little bit of that being able to, it's okay, or people who don't quite understand how technology works, or parents feeling like, I wish I knew more, but just going, it's okay if you can't go online today, because generally you're doing a really good job.
You all obviously had very different roles, and then the students came back to learning. Did you find as teachers that more students were engaged at home, or do you think they really do need the structure of school?
It really was a case of some students really flying, who maybe you just didn't notice in the classroom, but they really found being remotely at home, they had whiteboards set up behind them, they were organised, they felt in control, and that was their way of doing it. Others who really rely on us to give them direction, might be quite academically able students, they were floundering in some cases because they just did not have that direction, and it took them a little while to be able to find their place.
Some of them actually, I think, benefit from having the time to just concentrate on the work if they already had the skills to learn independently. Others craved their social interaction, and they would actually stay online and just be there, knowing that you were there while they were on their working, just sort of reassured them. Others just coped by disengaging totally because they could not, so they would switch off by, I assume, going onto social media or video games or something.
So the VCE students, you started year 11 and then had year 12 as well. How did you people cope?
Well, I think it all goes back to the same thing. Like, we thought that it wasn't going to last too long, so we kind of took that initial break. When it moved to being a bit longer, it was kind of like, okay, this is the new norm, kind of. But I think it was good in a way. Like, for me, I felt like I wasn't distracted as easily in class, and I was able to do my work when I wanted to.
I disagree.
Yeah, me too.
I got so distracted.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I thrive off people interaction. So in year 11 I started and I was doing chemistry and bio and all that kind of stuff because I was really into sciences and stuff, and then I had to drop chem because I needed that hands-on learning.
And what about from a learning situation, Anita?
Teachers and students were learning at the same time, and that was a very real experience. But they were very authentic. Both parties, I think, came to the table going, we've never been here before, so how about we try this? So the trial and error was actually a positive from my lens. The high flyers did have a moment of doubt in themselves and their confidence because they built such strong relationships with their teachers over the years, and then found themselves in the senior years not having that same experience in a year that counted quite a bit. And even on the online forum would still challenge the expectations in a classroom. I think the juniors were probably the ones who were the most vulnerable because they hadn't had much of a connection with the school as year 7s, and year 8 had only had one here. So building relationships and connections was the priority to get the learning done.
For at least half the students, it just didn't have the lifetime that we needed them to have. A couple of weeks, and then once they worked out the kinks and they worked out whether they needed to be there or not, or whether they were being enforced to participate in the lessons, cameras on, cameras off, mics on, mics off, that sort of thing. So it didn't have a really decent lifespan of of an educational platform. 4 weeks, I suppose. I reckon the wheels started falling off a little bit for
Yes.
a lot of the kids. There was still plenty that engaged with it like we did for the whole time,
Yeah.
but there were plenty that didn't.
Yeah, I really found that. At first, there was an energy to it. You know, like there was an excitement, and this is fun.
This is new.
You know, and the cameras were on, and that was good. But then, you know, by the second year, you know, it was just pretty. It was like it just went on, and it just got really
tough.
It got really tough.
Yeah.
I asked them what was the low light, and it was that social interaction. You know, being on the bus, going home with your friends, being in the playground. Which, you know, when we had the dreaded 5K lockdown and you couldn't, you know, bear to go out anywhere, that really reinforced, I suppose, that isolation that a lot of them had.
The year 7s this year have came like such a great big jump. Like, you know, starting year 5 in, you know, their senior year of school and now jumping straight into the deep ends of the waters like high school. You kind of look around at the different year levels and like see the difference between not like the maturity, I guess. Like you kind of look at the year 7s and you still go like, oh my God, they're babies. Like they have no idea what's going on.
Especially at the start of the year.
Yeah, especially at the start of the year. Like that, you know, they're still playing in like, you know, their playgrounds. But even you guys coming from, you know, year 7 and not knowing, you know, what really high school was and, you know, being thrown into it and then, you know, technically going back home and, you know, learning from home. Us being from, you know, year 11 to year 12, we already had fitted in and, you know, we knew everyone. We already had, all of like our links and everything with teachers.
So with, practical subjects, how did you do the subjects? Did you, for instance, have to cook at home or did you have exercises for IT?
Usually in PE, you would take a video of yourself and then you would like upload it to the teacher.
So the teacher set a task. So did you get through classes and things much quicker because you're at home?
Yeah.
So what about practical subjects? How did you go about that? Wasn't available.
We got very creative.
Did you get creative? Did you? I know that in science initially we said, you know, if it's just 2 weeks, we can just hold off on the prac. Let's just do lots of virtual stuff. There was a lot of taping of things using pre-taped simulations and things like that. And then by the time, you know, we were really into those lockdowns, we came up with a protocol where students had to make it optional because they didn't always have the, you know, resources, even paper, right? And scissors. So we had protocols where they could have opportunity to do some practical work. They learned the theory, but they don't know how to operate a microscope. So they're coming into senior year levels with some gaps that are really sort of affecting their learning, I'm finding.
Art was very hard. We shipped. We had like little packs that we purchased, and that worked, and that helped a bit. But it's still nothing like the range of resources and equipment that you have in a classroom.
As creative as we could be, the expectations had to change because whilst we're here at school, you know, you've got a little bit of enforcement that you can place upon them doing practical tasks. It shifted to, this is what I've set up for you. I would like you to do this.
The first thing that you need, that we know that you have, will be a bin. Hopefully it's a clean bin. Maybe you could do your parents a favour and get the hose out and give it a clean.
When it came to PE practical classes, it was like, okay, so we want you to go outside and we want you to, you know, make an obstacle course. We want you to go and kick a soccer ball. And so then that videotaping came sort of weeks, months later when we realised that, you know, that was the best way you can do it. And even then, you just had kids who just, nah.
The other thing that I also recall around the time, which is why we had to come up with, you know, initially we said no prac, we had to then consider how our duty of care lies learning versus safety as well. So we had to be very careful about how we actually ask our students and what kind of activities we ask them to do, because they're teenagers. So if you're going to go and tell them to build an obstacle course, they'll build an obstacle course, some of them, but perhaps they shouldn't build it in that way. So, you know, we had to be very careful with how we asked activities and what we asked our students to do to make sure that, you know, that they were still doing things that were reasonable.
I did VCAL, so it's a little bit different to VC. It's more hands-on work and kind of hitting those goals of like practical and theory. We got set goals on what we needed to do for the week, and that was kind of it. We checked in for a Zoom every morning, and it wasn't really like set classes in a way. It was kind of like, here's your task, check in when you're done, and then upload it once you get it finished. So it was definitely difficult because VCAL is that very hands-on work.
With some of the VCE subjects, like I did systems,
Mm.
like it's a very practical subject, so the more
Yeah.
practical subjects are kind of harder to do. I was very thankful, like my dad's got a lot of tools and stuff at home, so it was easier for me, but some others wouldn't have that.
The VCAL students were fortunate that they had their personal best project. We'd just introduced it prior to them leaving, and Bunnings became our friend, so each student was allocated X amount of dollars, and then through online ordering and deliveries to their houses, they then were able to complete their projects. A lot of repurposing, reusing of old and recycled materials was great. A lot of the houses, when we did our community projects, were never cleaner. You know, I've still got images of students cleaning walls and with hoses and gurneys and then painting them, and you know, cars being repaired, and a whole range of things there where parents were involved and not involved. But the program still kept going in a very skeletal way, but we were still fortunate to get things through.
So Sam, you were school captain last year. Your expectations and how it played out, how did that go?
In the end, I think a good balance of like being able to fulfill the role and then also do my own work, because I'm still at school obviously, so that's like the main focus. We filmed a lot more videos.
For
me
the
and
rest of the students?
Yeah, me and Mel and Eliza and Will. So we all kind of filmed a lot more videos for connecting with the students, I guess. If we were sitting at home on a Zoom meeting in homeroom and we all played a video, just be on our phones or, you know, getting a coffee or something, which is hard.
See how it goes.
Correct.
Do people remember seeing videos from the captains?
Yeah, fair bit actually.
You do?
Our homeroom teacher would like share their screen and they would play it for us.
Oh, okay.
Or we'll be like individually sent off to watch it on our own, but I don't think.
I won't ask for a show of hands who actually watched it. We don't want to upset Sam.
Never mind, Sam.
Now, you did something, Anita, about organising videos to keep the students engaged.
Yes, a team of us got together and were reading the signs and feeling the waters in each phase of lockdown, and wanted to be more responsive to the students in a personable way rather than through written communication. So it made sense just to embrace the media and the social media context.
John, your position really works mostly with the students, is that correct? Would you like to just fill us in a little bit about how you were able to connect with the students?
Well, connect's a really important word, Mary. We realised with the students off campus we needed to make sure that it was an ongoing connection. So we started off with a video based on Simon and Garfunkel. So we did a bit of a parody on the Sounds of Silence, but the school was empty without the students and we were missing them. And then from there we just continued to do small little videos to have them connect. Messages from the captains and the vice captains. The year level leaders would jump in and make their own messages on Classroom for them. So it was that notion of reaching out to them continuously to make sure that they knew, although they're on the other side of a camera, they were still very much part of our community.
Sounds of silence.
Looking at what the students have learnt, and you have learnt from being locked down, is there anything that you can then take forward?
Well, the reason why we employed Kane as the youth worker is to re-engage these students back into education and to learning and to love learning. Yeah, we're finding some students are hard to sort of
struggling to
get back into the rhythm.
You know, these kids have missed 2 years of growing up, so it's every day. It is every day is different. And just watching them, you know, starting to learn how to be in a classroom together, you know, boys and girls in a classroom together, and how to sit still. And it's a journey. It really has been a journey.
Because it's lockdown, and a lot of our parents are actually in the position of being laid off, and they're not in the position to basically pay off any repairs. So in a way, we have to put in some contingency and basically help them out to
The parents are certainly more forthcoming in saying, my child's not coping with this. So we're finding more parents reaching out. I think they've experienced the help and the support that we gave during those days. So they're more, I guess, confident in what we can do as a way of helping. So there's a real conduit there between home and school now.
But at the same time, parents are far more concerned about mental health issues with their children.
Yeah,
and trying to get them to understand that the best way to build resilience is through structure. So parents contact us and say, why are you so intent on structure? Why do you still talk uniform and give the students guidelines for this and that? And the answer is quite simple, because it's through that structure that students learn, and it's how you build resilience. But parents are really worried about the mental health of their children, and so they're sort of questioning, do we need that structure? So the school's saying to them, yes, we do.
Yeah.
You know, we need to return to the processes which we know to work.
Yeah, it's the known. The thing that shook the students the most was the unknown, how fluid things were moving, and this week could be different to the next. So by us giving that structure and that what is known, we believe, and all the literature supports it, that'll ground them and help the transition back in.
We saw a lot of parents online who were just making sure that the kids were doing the work and that we were happy with how they were going.
So you had lots of parent-teacher interviews.
We did, and meeting them all, and then now we see them in Coles and they go, hi, and you go, hey, I remember you.
Got to know a lot of pets too, I found.
Oh, yes, lots of pets out there.
Horses, ducks, everything.
Yeah,
Lots of pets.
Lots of
Tons
pets.
of pets.
And lots of little babies. Lots of babies, yeah.
One of the subjects I felt was the hardest hit was dance. And Steph Tonietto was trying to help her Year 12 students prepare for their dance solo, where they would have a whole stage to perform in their bedroom, you know, like in the living room. They'd be clearing furniture, and that was just really challenging. And I remember we got some concession where they were allowed to come into the school, but the amount of paperwork and date checking and is this okay, and what are the conditions, and what square meterage will they have? So much fussing around to ensure their safety.
It's been interesting to see how some students, the change, and from speaking to them, they sort of report how difficult it was to sort of readjust to this new life where they're essentially locked at home, trying to maintain their education and that connection to school online and friends, and navigating that whole new reality. And for at least a lot of the students that I see, they did adapt, and in fact some of them loved that new reality. They thrived in lockdown, and then when things switch again and all of a sudden they're back at school really permanently, that's where they're struggling to readjust again.
So you've got young children,
Yes.
and you were working from home as well.
Yeah.
Are they at primary school?
I had I had two at primary school and one in high school at the time. The two in primary school managed fairly well, but initially needed a lot of my time, because the school would send home paperwork. You'd have to go and pick it up from packages at the office door on the weekend, and that would do you 2 weeks. And so the youngest one was grade 3 at the time, and so you would need to spend a lot of time sitting and going through what she had to do and getting her set up and being there to answer questions, but thinking, I've got to get to my online appointment, in 5 minutes. My teenage son at the time, he really struggled. So he just found it really hard to get up and going, missed the school, missed the structure, missed being around his friends, didn't want to put the camera on, didn't like that being seen over the camera.
I've heard that.
Well, sometimes I would go back in and find this son back asleep. The Woodie's got a really, was the new school uniform, I think. The Woodie, did you find that?
Yes, I think. Now, a number of you have young children. How did you cope teaching your students and your children, or supervising if they're tiny ones?
This could be a whole session.
Because you've got very young children.
Yeah,
Too soon.
And it changed very much from the different lockdowns that we had. So I remember the first one, I'd always get dressed in uniform, and my daughter was good at learning, even though she was only 3, for the first one, when I was wearing this, I was working. Yeah, so all the classes met my family.
Yeah.
Which was it was good. I also look back at that time and I remember saying that hopefully in years' time you'll be able to look back at it and turn around and say it was actually a really nice time to be able to spend with the family.
Yeah. I had a day of teaching where I also had a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. One day where I was teaching a class on my phone that was attached to the pram as I was pushing the pram, holding a dog.
I think I've seen a picture of it.
Yeah, I think I took a photo of it at the time.
I think I've seen
And I
that.
think my son was up in front on his scooter because it was just the timing of it. As you know, with kids, it's like we got to get out.
Got to get them out.
And so that was just a reality. It did mean that at times our teaching suffered. Well, I say my teaching suffered, whereby I'd go, I'm running solo today with the 2 boys, so it's a case of set and forget classes, which is just, that was a reality of what you had to do. I had to post the work and I had to hope that they do it and come back to it later and check the live documents to see how they did. And I mean, the differences between me being present for a class and me not being present for a class was enormous.
Each evening was very much about me planning for the next day and explaining to my girls what they had to do, and they would have to wait. Normally, if they got stuck with work, the reality was they would have to wait until I not only finished school, but then finished all the online meetings, which as a faculty leader, we were involved in, those. Then it came that time where I could sit down and, I got stuck on this maths problem. Oh, Mum, can you read through this? Did I do that right?
I had to come into school too. So that was tough. Yeah, because you'd be working remote in the library with our kids as well as. So that was hard.
My experience, I've got 3 kids and they were all in high school. So it was like, at first I thought, I'm going to have more free time. No commute, no socialising with the staff as much. Like we had more meetings.
We did have lots of meetings, didn't we?
But the workload, the amount of time it took to prepare for a remote lesson, you just really had to have everything really well prepared.
You couldn't wing it as well. You couldn't. Just and
because their attention span was much shorter. You couldn't just. You didn't have the whole lesson with them because there's no way you could require the kids to be online all day. So you had to be quick, punchy, and then they had to be sufficient.
Memo here is obviously have older kids, so I was fortunate that mine had already left home, so it was just my wife and I.
Well done.
But you talk about the intensity of the school day. I was also doing a grad dip at the same time, so in between finishing all the school commitments, I then had to go online and do other commitments, which would normally be face to face. So I patted myself on the shoulders at the end of that. I thought, yes, I've actually doubly earned this particular certificate.
So you've experienced it as a student and as a teacher.
Well, I could communicate that to the students, and I use that as a learning experience. Saying, I know the troubles you're going through. And, oh, you don't know. I said, yes, I do. I could actually relate, the stories to them, and it helped a little bit to understand their issues too.
Yeah.
I think it's also probably important to recognise that we were the group of students, all of us who actually got to go back to school.
Yeah.
Because we were priority students, we could actually go back to school towards the end of it. Whereas, the year 8s, 9s, they suffered through it all. They were the.
So that's these.
Well, no, you guys
Yeah.
came back, didn't you? You came back at the start.
Year 7.
Yeah, year 7s and that were priority to come back as well.
That's why, to be honest, I feel for the students in year 9 because you've really lost 2 years of just incidental catching up with people and meeting people in the yard or playing sport. So their fitness when they came back.
I'd never seen year 7s and year 8s lacking fundamental motor skills like they do now.
Yes.
These kids who go through these growth spurts already become awkward when it comes to sport and they need to rewire their brains. Well, they'd lost the fundamental motor skills before they grew, and then they grew and it just doubled down. So,
I don't even know if we had a full school assembly.
I think we had
online.
one.
We had one, but obviously it's a webinar. You're not talking to one another, whereas...
And graduation.
And you're not seeing each
How
other.
did graduation go? What did you do for that?
Oh, we asked for
Not good.
and we got a couple
I think
of
there was
awards.
16 of us in
16 of
total,
us, and it was recorded.
So I believe it was people who were receiving awards and stuff like that, or nominated for awards. So they were all invited to graduation, and then it was zoomed for the rest of the year level. So yeah,
You weren't all together.
No.
At that time,
I missed it.
Like you could have groups together, so
Yeah.
you could get together. So,
So
in a
it
way,
wasn't-
the people who
yeah.
were there like felt like they were missing out
So
because
they
they
were all-
couldn't celebrate with their friends.
They were all
Yeah.
going off in like separate groups. Like I know all of my mates
to
went
watch it.
to a place, but obviously like I'm here
Yes.
and I don't want to be here.
We don't want to be here.
But then they're there and they don't want to be there. Like we all kind of wanted to be together.
Well, you still had your exams to do, didn't you?
Yeah.
Was it graduation
No.
after the exams?
I can't remember.
exams.
It's before.
Yeah.
Yes.
Guys, as you know, we've got a SAT coming up.
Excuse me, guys, could you please do your ties up? Yeah, sure.
Yes, I haven't done them in ages! Hey guys, do me a favour, take a shooting, please.
Yes, Mr. Rogers, we'd love to do that.
We'd love to do that. Guys, you know it's winter, you don't need to be wearing your hats at recess and lunch.
We're just so excited to be back.
So what about how you came out of COVID? Do you feel that you've learnt anything about yourselves, positively or negatively?
I got lower marks. I did a lot less work.
So it was motivation for you that wasn't quite there.
More like discipline. If there's not a teacher sort of like breathing on my neck, I'm just gonna lay on the couch. I don't need to do maths. It's fine. I'm a lot more productive now. I can motivate myself. I don't need someone telling me I got to do this. I can just go do it on my own now.
So did you do graphic design?
Yeah, I
in
did
year
graphic
12?
design. Yeah,
Okay.
and that was not fun during COVID.
I think I missed the more social part of it, but I think I did better at home than I did at school.
Learning at home was worse, like no motivation, just like wanting to do nothing.
So a lot of you are probably teaching many of the same students this year. How do you think they've coped coming back to school?
Some of them forgot how to socialise. And so in my 16 years of working here, I can count on my fingers how many fights I've seen. And in that first week, the 2 weeks back, there were just little spot fires everywhere because the kids had forgotten how to interact with each other. And I think they'd forgotten that they didn't have the anonymity that they had when you're online, and the lack of consequence when you say those sort of things because no one's there to do it. We lost, how many days you said?
267.
Of social construction,
Learning.
almost social learning, social
That's
development.
such an important part
Exactly,
of
just
school,
how,
isn't it? The
well,
social
exactly,
side.
and how to treat each other and how to speak to an adult.
An adult is different to your parents as well.
Exactly,
so,
that's the thing. That, like some of the kids, they'd speak to you and you go, and I said, "Would you actually say that to your mum?" And they go, "No." I go, "Well, some respect."
Coming into this role, one thing I didn't expect was working with so many young people who were having social issues that they just could not navigate themselves. So essentially just tensions among friends that they can't handle. They don't know how to resolve. They sort of immediately need sort of an adult to help sort of mediate these tensions.
We've heard some teachers saying, particularly like the year 7s, 8s and 9s, that they seem a lot more immature, from that, I guess, delayed or not being able to develop social
The rough and
emotional.
tumble of being in school and all those things, isn't it, that they learn.
Yeah, I feel there were even some simple things like sitting down in a classroom for 45 minutes as opposed to when they were at home and they could be behind a computer screen. Also, I probably noticed it more with the seniors this year, but the last time they completed a full school year was year 9, the year 12s.
That's huge,
and then to
isn't
come
it?
back and straight into year 12 VCAA course outlines has been a massive challenge.
So the year 9s, how have you coped having 3 full terms of school? Do you feel tired? You're ready for the holidays now?
Yeah, it was difficult to get organised because we weren't used to being back at school. But I think now I'm mostly into the routine of things.
Into the rhythm of it.
Yeah.
So the students now they're back, have you noticed, say, from 5 years ago, has their mental state, their attitude, is it more positive, negative? Could you define it like that?
It's a little bit hard to define, but I have noticed there's a slight increase in eating disorders or eating difficulties and disordered eating. So that's what research tells us as well.
Reflecting what's happening in the community.
Yeah. Their anxiety levels are sort of higher, and they're reacting a little bit more and maybe quick to react, possibly.
So
that could be a sign.
Affecting things in class, then they react negatively.
Possibly.
The teacher says something and they think they're being attacked, whereas really they're just being told something.
Talking amongst ourselves and thinking, that their developmental stages have been interrupted.
Yeah,
Learning.
socially, emotionally as well as the cognitive. So, not just the attention and the focus that has been impacted, but their social development, the exposure to those experiences. And adolescence is such a stage of being around peers.
Well, and school's a very important social part, isn't
Yeah.
it, for them?
Yeah.
We have students now who are absent through long COVID, and we do have these resources now. So we as teachers are giving. So we do find ourselves emailing those students who are absent and just saying, where you're absent, how about you catch up on this work and try to stay connected. We are more aware of trying to keep those students as focused as they can be. Whether they take up on that is up to them, but they're being given quite a few more opportunities because we're more aware of what we can offer.
The language of resilience is much stronger. We use words like adaptive and flexibilities and being responsive, and I think they've named the qualities of a good teacher and a good school, because that's what we've always been, but we've been called to stand and really act it out in a very intense way over 2 years. So those three things were always there, but now everyone knows those words. Adaptive, responsive, flexible.
And I would also say one of the consequences that we've still got to deal with is teaching people that teachers are not available to them 24/7. Because during COVID, teachers being who they are, made themselves available 7 days a week, 24 hours. They were answering emails, they were going on and doing Google Meets and all those sorts of things. So, we're now trying to go back to this is how we operate as a school, and teachers can't be on call 24/7.
And it's even this week, I had a student say to me, "Oh, could you just do a video for me just to explain it?" And it's hard to pull back, and clearly you have to say no because you cannot meet unrealistic expectations. It's very much reteaching ourselves as well what the expectations are.
One aspect that was important was to provide multiple options, just about getting out there and being active, because that's what they needed.
Yeah.
They needed that for their well-being.
Professionally yourselves, what do you think you can take away from the experiences you've had?
Certainly got a lot of new skills. When all of this was first announced, it was amazing how staff put their hands up to say, I've got this skill, I'll share it. And we did quite a bit of that. There was a week's grace between the announcement and actually going into remote. The one thing that I've realised though, coming out the other side of it, is how relational teaching is. And technology is wonderful to enhance your teaching, but that relational side is just so important for students to actually actively learn and that explicit teaching.
I'm 100% digital now.
Mhm.
I don't use any handwritten planners or anything like that.
I think the students that I work with, are very digital, and there's times that I sit in there in the classroom and I go, what do I do here? I can't clear this screen. Just this button, Mrs. S. Oh, thanks, okay. So, yeah, I digital all the way for them.
I think I learned a lot myself, actually. Like, I learned, it was quite... Because I was actually got into IT for that was that first year, wasn't it? Yep. So I just came on board the start of that year, and then I guess a few months later... so I was a bit nervous trying to help people over the phone with things maybe I wasn't prepared, I hadn't experienced. So it was a lot of learning from that perspective.
You're looking back now with all the knowledge you've got, would you have done anything differently?
Looking back now, all the preparations that we did
prior even to the COVID itself, just to prepare the school into moving forward with technology, I believe that helped. It has to be robust enough to support everybody. I mean, everybody's like, including parents.
It is the one thing that's lingered with me over the 2 years and into this year, and that's that teachers need teachers. No one understands what we do and how we do it and with what passion we do it, except the other. I think from a leadership perspective, leadership matters. And in a crisis, it was very clear that if we weren't a united team, we would never have achieved what we did. But we had such a multi-talented team, such a committed team.
In many ways, the teachers missed the relationship as much as the students did. And we need to recognise that, and we're actually still seeing signs of it because they crave relationship. In many ways, this year has been more difficult than the last two, because although we haven't had remote learning and although we've been on campus, the amount of sickness that we've had post-COVID, we're still trying to find ways to how do we improve the relationships in these times.
Two things that stood out was there was a real appreciation within our community for the work that the staff were doing. Parents couldn't thank us enough. They realised how much above and beyond the staff were doing, and our staff really did go beyond what they needed to do. Kids will come back and they'll strive, but isolation, they miss that component of how to be young people and to develop. So the holistic aspect really stood out for me.
All right, so what are you going to take from this? How are you going to perhaps change you?
For me, I feel like coming out of high school and becoming, that said adult, getting that full-time job, I don't know if any of you guys could agree, but getting that full-time job, it's almost like you're living in COVID because, you don't get as many social activities and stuff to do with friends anymore. Coming out of COVID and, it's almost like you're still living in it in a way. I feel like everyone's kind of adapted to it now that it's hit the 3-year mark.
I suppose the fact you know no different, do you?
Yeah, exactly.
11 and 12 to you is how you did
exactly,
11 and 12.
Yeah, it's kind of just, I think everyone's adapted to it now.
Working part-time and then going to uni where I can, or the rest of the time. So uni's a lot like COVID times for school, I guess. Like, you still got a lot of online lectures rather than in person.
I was going to say that I'm the opposite in that regard. My COVID showed me that I want to work with people. So I did do nursing and I couldn't do it. So I'm doing teaching now and all my classes are on campus and I've made so many new friends and I put effort in to see my friends. Before COVID, I'd be I'll just see at school and stuff but it's really motivated me to put myself out there more because you don't want to take it for granted. That's how I feel. With school and stuff, it really made me realise that I'm a people person.
The school going forward, we've all learnt things. The staff have learnt and they've come out of it as different people, and I think the students have as well. Do you think that's going to be a positive, that people will be able to go forward with that now?
We really need to think of it in that way. To think of it in any other way almost negates the learnings. So I certainly feel that the students have got a high level of resilience in some ways. Some of them have become quite independent learners, which they weren't earlier. The students are more open to having a look at resources that they've got available to them. So that has been a positive for the senior students, not so much the junior.
So the creation of resources which people made during those years of COVID, 2020 and 2021, they're good resources. So they're good resources that teachers can continue to use. And I think we're actually doing more of that now as a result of COVID because people learned to make such great resources because they had to, and they did. We've now got a combination of some face-to-face and some Zoom-type meetings. We're doing far more PDs over Zoom. So there's a whole lot of things which we have learnt to do better and differently to supplement things that we're already doing.
Teaching practice has certainly taken a big jolt of positivity. In 2 years, we have learned so much about technology, about pedagogy, And above all of that teacher language is the student voice that's grown from it, you know, because we were learners together, as I said. So we listened to them more intently than ever before. So as Janet said, some of them are still advocating for that one-to-one time, that explicit teaching with us, that connection about the learning, which may have been softer in the earlier years.
So is there anything else you think we need to know for the future?
Connections are really important, and that's what we missed, having that face-to-face connections, and you know, the well-being of a person is key. If we don't get that right, and if we don't focus on that, then the learning doesn't happen. So we've got to get that right
If
first.
your headspace isn't in the right place, it's not going to happen, is it?
Yeah.
The one thing I found is because kids experience that real difficult time, I just remember, and I still feel like it's here, is that they are grateful to be back in the classroom. Like there is an appreciation of school, which we didn't have pre this whole trauma. And I enjoyed it just with staff as well. It was like, yay, we're together. But I still think that's there. Like even when you ask, you know, do you enjoy school? And they're like, oh yeah, definitely prefer it rather than...
And they know what the opposite is, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I think they like being here as well.
We can't underestimate the positives that came out of this, the collegiality from the principal down. You know, when we got that chocolatey pack, I thought it was
Brownies,
Christmas
yum.
when we had the brownies. There was just a small gesture. Having little Zoom drink meets on a Friday night and things like that. You know, we forget about those things now.
That was trivia nights, that's right.
Yeah, we
You
had
played
trivia.
one, didn't you?
We played trivia nights, you know, with my own family and also with students and staff. So that was really...
Yeah, it's one of those things that it takes a crisis or a catastrophe to innovate. You say, would you take it back and trade it? Well, you might, but at the same time, we've probably gained a lot more than we think.
You can't go back, so we can only
That's
take
right, so, you
forward
know.
what we
Exactly
can.
what we've learnt. And if it ever happens again, that we'll be ready. And please not. But we will be ready. We know what to expect.
Good on you.
Excellent.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Both teachers.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you very much.